Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome, Nikolai. We are back in the mix once again and back to the Matrix. How are you doing
Here we
today?
are in the Matrix.
Yeah, we never left. Every time that I think
We never left.
it's like
Yeah, the
Godfather
only thing
3
is the Matrix is changing, and that's what we're briefly discussing leading up to that.
Yeah,
Transition V5, V6.
shifts in the Matrix. Um, so because again, I like to spam you with what's top of mind and things that I'm dealing with because I think it's not
Wow.
only
I wouldn't
educational for
call it
me,
spam. There's a lot of great questions and thoughts.
but what I wanted to talk about today is intergenerational trauma.
Mm, okay.
And I was curious, and the first thing I wanted to go with was like, how does intergenerational humanistic avatar trauma connect with the soul's journey when the soul is deciding, okay, I'm gonna reincarnate this time, this place, this avatar? And let's start with like, is the soul just coming in clean, or what's going on between the soul and the avatar and intergenerational traumas?
Yeah. Well, first of all, where I would start is to correct the misperception of the soul being pure.
Oh,
And people think, oh, everything that is in an energetic world, in the world of consciousness, in the world of angels and souls is pure. They have the same egos and they have the same distortions as we are. So people like, because people, when people talk about angels, oh, angels, it's like, nope, they're basically the same as you are. They have ego, they have their own distortions, they have their own desires, and etc., etc. So coming back to soul loading into the body,
mm-hmm.
we should ask ourselves in the first place, why the fuck is it loading into the body? It's loading to this body to actually work through inharmonies. So the soul, it starts with inharmonies, and inharmony is, well, inharmony maybe is is a bit of a wrong expression, but right at the same time, the soul is a mix of energies, and as part of this mix of energies, or soul or consciousness, it already is good and knows how to interact with specific type of energies. And what I call inharmonies is the part of the mix where it doesn't know how to interact with different type of energies. So by loading into this body, it loads into the game where it can experience a very diverse mix of energies through other people, and it learns how to interact with the other types of energy harmoniously. So in the first place, the soul is the one that brought the so-called inharmony, and the soul in the first place is what shapes our personality. And as we know, there's a very diverse set of personalities on this planet, and all of them have their inharmonies, distortions, or weak sides, and all of them have their strong sides, and etc. It's sometimes people misperceive when they're like, for example, look at a monk in a Buddhist monastery, or some kind of guru, or some kind of a if they're religious priest, they think, oh, they're holy, they're high vibrational. In some scenario, they're higher vibration than you, but everyone here who loads in this body loads here with inharmony, because otherwise there would be no point loading here. So everyone, as as Maxime says, is a sinner here, but this is a religious term and it's incorrect, because people think to be a sinner is that you had to have done something wrong. No, in the first place, we've already came here not knowing how to do something right, meaning we come here not knowing how to interact with specific types of energies that we haven't interacted with, where our souls has loaded previously in other sectors of the universe. And we come here, and that the reason this planet is so unique and so beautiful is this planet is in between high vibrational sectors of universe and low vibrational sectors of universe. So there is a crazy what do they call them, this Korean or Asian thing where you throw everything in the soup, hot pot.
Oh, hot
Or
pot. Yeah.
yeah,
Hot pot.
hot pot of different representations of energies here. Hence this planet, or V5 matrix, we call it a school evolutionary. It's the school of accelerated evolution, because when you load in a hot pot like that, you either figure out how to navigate it, and then you can evolve very rapidly because you're exposed to so many different types of energies. And the way, if I convert the word energies, because it could sound very intangible or woo-woo, there's so many different personalities, there's so many different cultures, there's so many different states, that different geographical regions exist. There is a state of war. There is like what's that, the Burma or whatever the name is in Asia, where they're like considered the happiest nation, and they're just like, most of them are like monk type of people. Then there is people who are chasing gold and more money and etc. So, and that's the beauty of this planet, or it was a beauty of this planet. So that version of the matrix is at its completion, and it helped whatever souls loaded into the body to rapidly learn and evolve, because we get exposed to so many different types of energies. And V5 is basically done, and now it's folding. The energy is there's less and less energy supporting that matrix as it's transitioned to V6, which we previously talked about extensively in other episodes, which will be about, rather than harmonizing personality, only high vibrational avatars who figured out how to harmonize or learn how to interact with the energies they were supposed to learn to interact with. Only those avatars will stick around. Hence, they will be quite peaceful, constructive, harmonious. There will not even be a thought, I want to kill somebody, steal something, because when you're in that state, you become energetically sovereign, meaning you have so much energy traveling through your body that you feel what people are constantly seeking, the abundance. You finally achieve the state of abundance, and in that state of abundance, even if you live in a tent under a tree, you feel like you have everything. There's not even a thought to go work, I don't know, an office job because you want to buy a bigger tent. It's just not, the only thought you have is, what could I create for the world that makes me happy? And the creation process would make me happy. So hence the V6 matrix becomes all about creation of co-creation. What can I create, and what could I co-create with others? So, and coming back to the what do you call it, the trauma, the generational trauma, cross-generational, intergenerational trauma, when the soul chooses to load into the body, it and we've mentioned this, I highly recommend watching the cartoon Soul or reading the book by Michael Porter, The Journey of Souls. Before it loads in, it previews the trauma of the family you're loading in, because, and the reason it's important, let's say if my soul was loading in, like, let's take example of your soul. If your soul was loading in to learn how to harmoniously interact with material energies, and material energies, that's money, that's I don't know, car, anything that is material.
Yeah.
And it's learning how to harmoniously use it as an instrument, not succumb to that energy controlling you, your life, your happiness, and etc. But at the same time, having everything that makes you happy, have comfortable lifestyle, and etc. So your soul chose to learn this when it loaded in. So when looking at the family, it was looking at the family that already, and then it's just one of your energies that probably had some challenges with that. So, and it prefers to load somewhere where right away that trauma becomes very obvious because it's passed on to you by your family. And so hence it forces you to deal with it versus loading to somebody. Let's say you loaded in into like mega rich family, and there was a generation of entrepreneurs who just succeeded, and
Yeah.
they're like, hey, everything's fine. It's like, why should I even pay attention to this? But then you would still be uneasy with that energy. It would be messing things up because you're learning to ride a bike, and it just, like, the experience would be strange.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting how the soul could choose a journey that is either so difficult or challenging, and maybe that's why it would do it, because it's like, well, I don't want the easy game, I want to have the game on extra hard mode, right? But for example, if we have an ancestor maybe like 6 generations ago and they did something bad, and then that trauma is then continually in the system and is being,
Yep.
I mean, it's like so far back here, I'm like, I don't even know who this person is, I've never met them, I've
Yep.
never seen them. If I didn't have specific modalities, I wouldn't even have access to that information. I would just be going through
Your
life and I'm like,
personality would be shaped by that. Yep.
yeah, I'd just be having issues, right? And I'm like, well, I don't
Yep.
know where these issues are coming from. So yeah, it's sort of interesting. One thing I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned it and I wanted to touch on it. So are all personalities based on souls then? And so if that's true, then are we not really even having personalities, but we're just having a reflection of the soul?
Yep. That's you've nailed it. We were just, because think of it, this is just bag of meat. As soon as you disconnect it from consciousness, it dies.
Mm,
People think it dies when the heart stops or something. Disconnect the body from consciousness. Uh, it or some kind of a energetic support system, because in some scenarios right now they're on a planet, bunch of bags of meat that is not connected to souls, but they are connected to other energy sources. Like some of them are supported purely by matrix, and they play out matrix programs. Some of them supported by other civilization for their games and etc. But there needs to be an energy source. An energy source in our scenario is the soul. And as it loads in, and by the way, that's another thing you could observe, I guess, double clicking on the ones that were without soul. If you, well, there are a lot of those avatars, and for people who know how to distinct them, find a distinction who those avatars are. I've interacted with many of those, and given I see the context, those avatars are their personality is very malleable because there's no personality. They're very
mm.
serving. They're like, hey, do you want to eat shish kebab or a vegan curry? Oh, I'm okay with both. It's okay. And it's like, hey, do you want to live in Montenegro or United States? It doesn't matter. Both are fine. Because there's nothing really, there's no evolutionary program there. The reason, for example, we would choose, I don't know, live in Montenegro, because for us, it creates more happiness, more support for our evolution, more specific type of energy, either that we're learning or that is good for us. For them, it doesn't matter. It's like literally they're like this very and then ultimately, because they exist in a social matrix, they kind of create a personality, but that
Mm-hmm.
personality is very easily changeable. They could be, let's say, I don't know, let me paraphrase it. There are no strong preferences. Even though there is a personality, there's no strong preferences, and they're changeable overnight.
Mm.
And mhm.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that that was one of the questions that I had, where often there becomes that nature versus nurture sort of um, discussion where, okay, well, what is really shaping the personality? And if it's true that, okay, the personality is really just a reflection of the soul, well, then it shouldn't have really much to do around. It should be not necessarily fixed, but it should be very strong, and it shouldn't be so much about the
The upbringing, the
the
society, the
events or
environment.
society or anything, right?
Yeah.
It should come in
Well,
like,
and that's where it gets interesting, and this ties to our conversation pre-hit record button. Um, so we load in, the soul shapes our personality,
mhm,
but then we exist in the world where everything and anything shapes us as well. So the deepest character traits, either their strengths and positive character traits, or so-called karmic or things we haven't learned how to do, shaped by the soul. Those are our factory default settings. Where this game on the planet Earth got super fucking hard is that we load into this environment and people start telling us things about us. And when we accept it and load it in, we create a layer in between, because think of it, well, the way people perceive or think about it, the soul and spirit is somewhere there.
yeah,
In reality, it's the reason people say open your heart or connect with your heart. In reality, it's goes within. It's deep within. So if you want to really connect with the soul and spirit, it's deep within the heart center or in the center of your chest. But for simplicity purposes, I'll pretend they're upstairs. And so we load in, and that's why when you watch children, young children, they just express themselves without filters the way they are. They express themselves through factory default settings. If they load it in, let's say, with this with the desire with a goal to learn how to interact with material, you might observe in a child not sharing toys with another child. It's mine because I want to accumulate the material, because they haven't learned yet how to how to interact with that type of energy, and they don't care what you're explaining. But then the nurturing, the society, the education, the movies, the news, and etc., adds the layers. So hence we stop being able to read our factory defaults, and kind of like those other avatars without the consciousness or without the souls, we start thinking we're someone else. And because we've created this additional layer of identity. And then what made it challenging is many people have difficulty differentiating what their factory default is, because if you stick to the factory default of what the soul loaded, your strengths, lean into them, and your weaknesses evolve or learn how to turn your weaknesses into strength, basically, and the weaknesses are the energies we're learning how to interact with, then you live happy, healthy, wealthy life. But now we've picked up all these layers, and now we're leaning in and trying to fix the weaknesses that are not even ours. We think we have strengths, but like, let's say somebody watch how Ronaldo plays soccer, right? And it was like, oh, I'm going to be like Ronaldo. Created sub personality of Ronaldo, but that's not in their original factory default. There's no energy for that. And now they think it's their strength, whatever they picked up in his, let's say, his morning ritual, and expressing themselves through physicality, which is strength and willpower, but they have no energy of strength and willpower, and they start expressing that way, they fail. So right now, so that's why this game got so challenging, and so many people are lost, and very few people have found true deep happiness, because they're chasing all this stuff. And what we discussed before the call, what we're figuring out now, and we'll share it with the public, is how do we burn through all of those layers and get people very rapidly to factory default settings, so that the game kind of almost gets reset a bit, so they can start over, and actually it becomes easier for them to align with who they truly are. And then the learning the new energies becomes easier, and leaning into the energies that are already superpowers becomes easier, and then life becomes easier overall and happier overall, and the list goes on.
So, what do you think about different educational systems? For example, and I don't know much about it. You probably know more than I do, but I believe it's isn't it the Montessori where they're looking, okay, what are the quote unquote talents being expressed as from the kid when they're younger, and
Yeah.
should we be using those natural talents as the barometer for where everybody should go, or what direction people should be flowing into? And if that's so, maybe just as a society, we need to actually start looking at, kids from the very, very young ages and saying, okay, what is being expressed in this personality? Because this personality is here for something. And
Uh,
maybe we should push it in that direction.
Well, and that's exactly where the V6 matrix is. It will be impossible to live otherwise. Like basically, because to transition to V6 matrix, you should have connected with your factory default settings and harmonized and learned to interact with energies that you came to learn to interact with here. And when you get through that journey, your what people call your intuition goes through the roof. What basically happens, you become an aligned being, so you get a clear message from your soul and spirit, from within. I'm showing you from upstairs. And when you're fully synchronized, that's basically what we call synchronized triad, right? Your mind, soul, and spirit and synchronized. Soul and spirit have full access to your incarnation program, to your baby's incarnation program, to your wife's incarnation program, to Mitch's incarnation program, and the list goes on, because we're all connected. We're all energy. We're all a bigger field of consciousness, right? So when a baby is born into your family and you have no layer that, first of all, makes you out of sync and makes you live out of sync, uh, you live in synchronization, in happiness. You feel your baby's program fully, and you intuitively direct them, and you intuitively create opportunities for them that basically bring to the surface their strengths, and also create constructive experiences to navigate the evolutionary experiences of their weaknesses or inharmonies. And that's where we're heading. And yes, there are poor forms of execution on that. Some are better. Yes, I've heard a little bit about Montessori, but since I don't have children, like, I'm not deeply aware of all the educational systems. With that said, it's less about educational system and it's more about the parent and how the parent explains to the child how to interact with the system. Because you can literally go to the shittiest educational system with the right set of values and be perfectly fine. And like, I've seen some examples where, like, parents were in sync enough, or I'm observing now some parents where they're in sync enough where they know their incarnation program of their children, and they've explained it to them, and they've spent time with them aligning them. So when the child goes to old school system, they're like, so for example, they don't get punished when they come back, and let's say they got a crappy mark on some subject that is not even in alignment where they're going. They're like, that's perfectly fine. It's like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Like, if somebody doesn't have strengths and willpower, and like sports is not really, they're not pulled to sports, they'll just do okay in phys ed class and they won't double click on it, and they'll like be an average student, and it's like, that's fine. Just do as much as makes you feel comfortable. You don't need to win a medal. It's not your path. So it's really giving children the right set of values and supporting them in what the system or society would perceive as mistakes. Then you actually change the perception. It is not a mistake. It's actually a mistake of a system, because it treats you like everyone else, and it's okay for you not to be a champion in, I don't know, in athletics.
Mm. So coming back to the traumas a little bit, where does DNA stand in all of this then? Like,
Yeah, that's a great question.
because
Yeah,
when I'm thinking about this journey, it seems to me there's so many different pieces, right? Like, okay, well,
yeah,
you've got Matrix, you've got the soul, you've got this quote unquote bag of meat, and then you've got somehow where this bag of meat can store genetic and DNA programming, and then, well, what does that have to do with everything? So what have
So,
you found?
so DNA is the closest to mimicking the energetic cocktail. What I mean by that, even if you actually will go look up studies, there are a bunch of studies that DNA replication is influenced by electromagnetic frequencies, and that's why everybody started freaking out by that electromagnetic waves are actually hurting you. One of the reasons they're hurting you, when they take and replicate DNA and they expose it to specific frequencies, the DNA changes. So DNA is basically the closest. So we load in here as an energetic mix. Let's call it a formula of energies. Like, I don't know, 5 liters of this energy, 1 liter of this energy, 500 liters of that energy, and etc. Right? Imagine that's that cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
And DNA is the closest representation of the energetic formula. And then DNA shapes everything else. So hence why it's so important to choose for the soul to choose the family, because it looks at the different families to find that the mix that is the closest mix of what it's in the physicality as well. So it would choose, let's say in your scenario, choose a family that is also learning how to interact with the material energies, and it's already in DNA, so it will come up right away as an obvious thing. So that's basically it. That's what DNA is and nothing else. And now what's happening, scientists have now are realizing there's new research coming out. For the longest period of time, there was a bunch of DNA that they called garbage DNA because they didn't understand the purpose of it. And that so-called garbage DNA is just DNA that is unlocking and creating the support for existing in a higher vibrational space. So before we didn't understand it, now it's actually activating and making us a more complete beings with more capabilities. So now DNA, that so-called garbage DNA, becoming less and less garbage and becomes active part of DNA. It's almost like unarchiving and becoming also possible to be studied by the scientists.
Interesting. So when we're looking at the soul coming in, right? We're incarnating, we're coming into this new lived experience. Does anybody ever come in with a quote unquote clean slate, or is every time that we're coming in for the incarnation, we're coming in with let's just call it like a bunch of baggage that needs to be harmonized on some level, or do you actually have souls or people that incarnate where it's just like totally clean?
An excellent question. It varies. So there is as usual, there is a spectrum. And for example, we work predominantly with old advanced souls. When they load in, they like choosing fucking hardcore incarnation programs, and there are many parameters, but we'll pick one parameter of the energies that the soul wants to learn to interact with. You can choose anywhere from, like, let's call it 2-3 energies to around 10 major energies that you're going to learn to interact with. So in your scenario, I think you have like 7 or 8. If you chose 7 or 8, fuck, you're going to be triggered because there are many energies. Do you see what I mean? There are many energies that you're learning how to interact with. But I'm like working with someone right now, they have 2 major energy. Well, actually, no, 1 major energies. Most of the karma is 1 energy, and then there is a second one, and there is few more in the background. So in total, I think maybe it's like 4 or 5, but in reality, out of 5, 1 is the one. If she nails the experience with that one, then like 80% of her life becomes harmonized. With that said, it seems like, wow, but that's easy. That's like, why didn't I pick that? But since that's the core of her experience here, fuck, she gets screwed around that energy. Like, the type of family she was born in, and like generational issues, then like all the relationships, all the other experiences in life keep hitting there. So it also could feel like really crappy, because even though it's one energy and it seems like it's easy, but such a huge part of her life is out of harmony, because that energy is everywhere in her life, because Matrix is just mirroring, learn how to interact with it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Of
like on
course, once you
repeat.
discover, exactly, but once you discover the pattern, or somebody explains to you the pattern, then it becomes easy to navigate it. But
Mm.
if you haven't fully nailed the pattern, you're like, why am I getting screwed everywhere? So it could be perceived same as for you. Then another parameter there, when the souls load, there is also like they choose the intensity of the load. So like you can choose different types, but then there is also a load, like we call it internally karmic load,
Mm-hmm.
like how difficult it, like what the level you chose it to be. And we've seen people who have like light karmic loads, and besides the number of energies, how intense it's going to be. And for them, they do experience challenges, but they're either smaller or not felt intensively. But then the ones that choose, like, let's call it hardcore level, they're like life and death situations. Like the intensity is insane. For me, I'm like, I'd say I'm slightly above average intensity. No, maybe less than slightly, like above average. So it's a higher intensity.
Mm-hmm.
But then, for example, Maxime, my partner, his intensity was through the roof. So the number of experiences in his life that are life and death experiences, like losing a child, almost losing another child in an accident, like had to like change careers multiple times overnight, like is just insane. Like
Yeah.
most avatars just don't even make through it. They're like at some point in time, thank you very much.
Yeah,
It
this
was
has been
fun.
fun. I'm exiting.
I'm exiting. I'm checking out here. So
Mm.
yeah, there are, and I just touched on couple factors. There are many other factors that create either the perception, like the light. Let's say the load could be light, but then the mix of energies is such where it's more difficult to navigate this environment. So, for example, we've discussed it with you. You have one of your dominating energies is love, and I've consistently observed people who have one of the dominating energies of love is challenging for them to navigate this environment of planet Earth, because they come from the assumption of like this unconditional love and empathy, whereas most of the environment is hostile here.
Yeah,
And they end
yeah,
up
totally.
in weird situations. And but then once they recognize it, and now once they learn how to use it as an instrument rather than Achilles heel, then the life changes.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention it in that way because just recently I had an experience yesterday where that was very the love piece was very um, predominant, and I was able to see that. Also, what's fascinating is for example, in a lot of family constellation work, and I had actually had the same thing. Also, funny enough, with my ayahuasca experiences, and I'm curious how they might be connected, if at all. But I would know people that, for example, they get a family constellation done, and it's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's like, normal. I have something and it fucking goes off the rails, bro. I mean, it's just like you're like, what the fuck is going on here? And everybody, it's like you just want to grab a bag of popcorn and just sit down and be like, yeah, this is entertaining as fuck. Um, and I also had the same experience when I would previously when I did the ayahuasca. I mean, people would talk about their journeys, and I would have this most fantastical thing possible where it's absolutely crazy because you'd go around after sharing your experience, and somebody else was like, yeah, I was just, with some bunnies and a couple of unicorns, and life was good. And I'm like, and then this happened, and this, and then blah, 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 blah. And people are just like, the fuck did we drink the same thing? I'm like, yeah, but it's every time it does weird shit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mhm.
what's behind that experience, or why does one soul say, I need to have this extreme something, whether it's extreme experience, extreme vision, extreme whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
versus the other souls where it's kind of run of the mill, average Joe. It's a smooth, maybe a little
Yeah.
bumpy ride, but it's okay. It's not like we're doing
Yeah.
Six Flags going upside down. So
Yeah.
yeah, tell me about
One
those.
one more thing I would, before answering this, one more thing I would add to parameters, talking about intergenerational stuff and lineage.
Hmm.
Some load in to also clean up lineage karma, not just their own karma. And
Oh, it
in
feels
in
like
my
that.
situation, my sister is an incarnated guardian of the lineage. Sometimes the guardians of the lineage are not incarnated, and then they're managing all that. And it's basically she has all these extra responsibilities to deal with the energy of the lineage and karma of the lineage and etc. And was interestingly when because I got into advanced let's call it spirituality. She's the ones who started in spirituality earlier, that but I ended up in advanced spirituality earlier, and I was trying to do that stuff in the lineage, and for the life of mine I felt like I'm talking to the wall, because I don't have that energetic status. So even if, like, she could say the same sentence or the sentence that explains something even more in a confusing way, and she'll be understood by like my parents, by our parents, and I would say something and explain it better, and it would just like it was just completely like what we're chatting about pickles. Do you want some extra pickles? And it's like, no, I had enough pickles, you know.
Shot of
uh,
vodka. Yes.
yeah, exactly. So that's another thing, is like that could be another parameter that we choose loading in here.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back to the question about experiences and thirst versus light, there's just so many factors. Some factors are, once again, younger or more advanced soul, or readiness. Let's say a soul sees that that avatar is not ready for the Six Flags experience or for full awakening, so it kind of throttles the ayahuasca or the mushroom or meditation experience. And if somebody is like overdue, like I'll give you an example. I had the first like my like, and I didn't like, I've tried different psychedelics, quite a few, but I've done them like, shouldn't say all of them constructively, but even when I didn't do them in this constructive environment, they were like Six Flags experiences for me. That's why I've done them very rarely. And like, and I haven't done them in a while because I realized I can just access a lot of it 100% sober. And, but then I had this experience in Bali where this woman took me, it's called regression. You can regress in past lives, or you can regress into where your spirit guides are. Spirit guides are basically souls, unincarnated souls that try to help you, guide you through your incarnation program. So they're parts of consciousness that don't have bodies, that are trying to shoot down the insights to you, so that your life is easier. And so that's another type of regression where you can go meet those souls, or those pools of consciousness, those energies, right? They're also cocktails of energies. They also have egos. In other words, in religious words, we can call them angels. Those are just your personal angels that are attached to you to make sure you don't do stupid shit, and survive in this body. So when I had that experience, I kind of had Six Flags experience, and she was like freaking out because when I like, she took me up or in, right? Because it's really, you're going in.
Mm-hmm.
And the spirit guide was hilarious. He was like, dude, are you a fucking idiot? We've been waiting for you for years. Why are you so slow? So that was the communication, right? Like, I was so ready for awakening, but I was so stuck in a material capitalist overachiever world, building companies. And I was like, nope. And I was holding on because the impulse for my awakening came on in 2016. I started having panic attacks. I started having all types of weird experiences. I thought I completely screwed up my head and my brain with concussions from wakeboarding. But in reality, it was just, if somebody told me, it was just part of a waking process. Like, I went to every possible doctor, I went to every possible test. They did so many scans, and they're like, most of them show I'm fine, and blah blah blah. And but in reality, I was awakening in 2016, but I was resisting until 2019. So that's why by the time I got to this regression, that was end of 2020. So 4 years, this avatar was resisting where the soul and the spirit guides were pushing the avatar to. They were like blocking every possible road, doing all types of stuff for this thing to go online. And then when I finally like go online, the spirit guide there goes, "Wow, dude, you're fucking dumb. You're like, we've been trying to make it like lighter and easier for you and guide you, but you've just resisted. So hence we give you panic attacks." So we shut down the top of energy, because panic attacks is just, they turn off energy more and more and more, and then you start feeling like you're gonna die because you're running out of energy. Because that's an example where you can exit this incarnation. If they fully close the tap, the body dies one or another way, gets in an accident, or just starts having major health problems, and etc. So the panic attacks in the moment seem like, and it's interesting. In the moment, it was like the worst thing that happened to me, because I became completely dysfunctional human. I couldn't go to the office. I couldn't be productive. Like, step left, like a wrong step left or step right, I have a panic attack. I'm out for at least an hour in a panic attack. And then I'm out for at least 2-3 days for the body to clear out all the cortisol and adrenaline. So my physical body is just hurting. And I'm just lying in bed for all the neurochemicals and hormones to reset in my body. And I would have them more often than once in 3 days. So it was just one on top of another one on top of another one of another one, and etc. So it became completely dysfunctional. But that's exactly what forced me to stop and to start pondering about life. And because for 4 years I was resisting, because for 4 years I was already very unhappy with what I was doing, where I was living, how my life was, but the reason it was so confusing is because I achieved what society told me was supposed to make me happy. Right. And I might have shared this story with you or on this podcast. I like, one of those wake up calls was, think it was around 2017, 18. I'm driving a convertible Porsche to Half Moon Bay, Ritz Carlton, one of my favorite hangout spots, for lunch and for brainstorming about business. And I live in a beautiful apartment overlooking Bay Bridge and the Bay in San Francisco, and I have a similar penthouse in Toronto that's overlooking unobstructed view of the lake. I'm married. Back then I was maybe not married. Maybe I was single. I got married 2019. I got married, but I was in a relationship leading up to getting married, etc., etc. Right? But on the inside, I'm fucking miserable, and I was like, completely did not connect. And I remember it was right before the turn that I'm starting to fully realize the situation. I'm like, in a material world, I'm super successful and comfortable, but I don't experience any comfort or joy from any of it. And I'm super fucking miserable inside. And to me, it's like a dissonance. I'm like, is there something wrong with me? Like, I have everything. I should be happy. Why am I not happy? But that was the awakening that started, that was trying to align me with who I am. And I wasn't doing what I'm supposed to do. That's why I wasn't happy. And that's, even though I bought more material things, they were not making me happy. And that's just a misalignment, because I picked up so many programs. Happiness equals this, 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 and this, what society or upbringing told us, the Hollywood movies told us, and etc. And that's right now, we've chatted briefly about this right before the call, what's happening right now, and it's completing. For the past couple months, a lot of people have been feeling a little bit lost about what's next. Not a little bit, a lot lost about what's next. what they're supposed to do, what are next steps, even like either in personal life, business, where to live, and etc., is because the timelines for everyone, the way the matrix works, first all the events get shaped in energetic field, and then they show up in the world of forms or in the physical world. So, and they're like get set up, like you can imagine them as a blueprint. They're just like outlined, right? They're there, and then as you go through life, they start showing up in your life, and they're not concrete events. There are many timelines that you could take. So when the and we've talked, I think we've talked in one of the episodes, when we load in, we have the shortest, happiest path from point A to point Z for us. But then there are many additional timelines that we can take as scenic routes, because we can get lost. We can pretend that we're Ronaldo, even though we're not Ronaldo. When we pretend we're Ronaldo and we're not, we start taking another path. At the end of the day, it still leads to point Z, but it's longer. It might be more psychologically, physically more challenging, because you face more abstractions, more course correcting events that are triggering. So what has been happening in the past few months? Matrix 5 is done. Matrix 6 is already loaded, and right now the shift is happening. So in Matrix 5, all these additional timelines were allowed and were possible because Matrix, we've chatted about this, Matrix 5 was designed for younger souls. And as a younger soul, you can choose who, like, you can play different experiences and try on different experiences to see who you'd like to be. Whereas right now, for Matrix 6, only mostly advanced souls are sticking around. They already know who they are. So when you load into this Matrix as advanced soul, and it offers you, oh, you could be an astronaut, you can be a baker, you could be a financier. But as an advanced soul, you're already the soul, because remember, soul shapes our personality. It already came here with superpowers, and it already is an expert in something. So, for example, Nikolai's soul is an expert of helping people transition from lower vibrational to high vibrational. So he could express as a teacher, a spiritual guide or mentor. He could express as a builder of some kind of school, whatever, right? So there is already expertise in that energy and the personality. So now all these timelines have been cleared. There's no more energy there. So a lot of people felt apathetic or maybe a little bit depressed or lack of clarity because those timelines are disappearing. The ones who are closer to the main and the easy timeline, they might not even feel the shift, but they still felt a little bit apathetic because events are rebuilding and they're almost done rebuilding. And people who are in the scenic route of the event, they're gonna start experiencing a lot of course correction because they need to realign with the main timeline. So we're in a very interesting period of time right now, and I'm speaking about the past couple months, and that process is almost complete. And as this process completes, people will start sensing again that there is future, and apathy will disappear. But that future now will be leading them to realign with the main timeline. So, and now I went down
Well,
a rabbit hole on that.
Yeah, well, I wanted to finish on that because if we're looking at greater society right now, right? I've noticed, especially if you're on, social media as an example, now we've come to the trend where maybe 50 years ago, everybody wanted to be an astronaut, right? Or everybody
Yep.
wanted to be a doctor. Everybody wants to be an influencer. And so now you see this mass, I want to be famous. I want to be an influencer.
I want to be copy someone else who has power,
TikTok,
fame, money, success, or whatever.
and this is, the OnlyFans girls, you name it.
Yeah.
So, and you may not know, but I'm just curious, if you were to look at where we're at now, what percentage of the people out there would you say are actually on their alignment path versus the people that are not?
That's a great question. Uh, I'd say, okay, it's very difficult to call the percentage, and I'll explain why. Because first of all, subset of people don't even have soul, so there's nothing to align with. They're just, so let's call them NPCs. With that said, even the ones with the soul can be NPCs if they're not connected to the soul. And there's this great movie called Free Guy about NPCs. And what I was saying is the ones without souls are predominantly NPCs. Even with the ones with souls, if they're not connected with their soul and spirit, they're acting like NPCs. So, like, let's remove huge chunk of population who are not even connected to consciousness. Then we take that, and there is you cannot say they're like it's not binary 0%, like 0 is not aligned and 1 is aligned. It's a percentage, right? Some people intuitively, for example, aligned with their purpose and objectives here, but are resisting their karma, which is like the energies they're supposed to learn. Some people done really well and focused on learning the new energies, but haven't aligned with their purpose. So what I'm sensing out of the ones that can be aligned, meaning have a soul and here to stick around, they're probably around 10% that is like over 75% aligned. So not a huge number, but what I'm observing more and more are getting aligned. And like I'm chatting with some people who are like not exposed to any spirituality or any of the conversations we're having, and intuitively they're either quite aligned just because they trusted intuition rather than living in their head and trying to copy someone, um, or they found other modalities that are nowhere about, let's call it, alignment. They're modalities like psychology or some kind of a like pragmatic business coaching that optimizes for the right things. And I'll like one example, I worked with a business coach in Bali who is not about spirituality at all, but the tools he picked were to align me with happiness, because what his thesis was, if the founder entrepreneur is happy, then the business just works. That was his thesis. He intuitively picked it up. So he was aligning me with who I am by aligning me with happiness. And so there are a bunch of people who've like picked the right metric and was like, what do I want on this in this life on this planet? I just want to be happy. Okay, what are the different tools that can help me get there? Use those tools. Or what makes me happy? Oh, this and this and that automatically makes you more aligned. So the metric and the vector is very simple. Follow what honestly and authentically and genuinely makes you happy. Because the reason for it became a little bit challenging for, not a little bit, quite a bit challenging for a lot of people, because a lot of people stop differentiating pleasure and happiness. And they think what gives them pleasure is what makes them happy. But the differentiator there is pleasure is short lasting, and every new cycle of pleasure derived from the same type of energy or experience has to increase. Either, let's say, I don't know, if you're into sports, then every match has to be more like, you know, eventful. You gotta have more VIP seats in the stadium, and like, and if the match is 0-0, you're like, 0, you derive 0, right? Like, or very little. Or you sit on the at the back, then you're like, oh, it's a better experience, and etc. Whereas happiness and joy is more sustainable and it's more peaceful. It's not explosions of like pleasure. It's more like, oh, I'm just happy. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm more happy, but it's not an explosion of happiness. It's just this feeling that you're like, everything is great in life. And that's where people got confused. They think they're seeking those so-called in the world of entrepreneurs peak experiences. Everybody wants to have even more peaks, but then like, and we've worked and we coach a bunch of people who are like very loaded and they bought every possible fucking peak experience on this planet, and then some of them end up in just like off path of going into drugs because they're like, okay, you take more and more dosage and then you exit the incarnation. That's also a path. And some of them start realizing, okay, they got to change something and they got to figure out something else because buying more peak experiences doesn't do shit anymore. And so now they start seeking why that is, and they start trying to understand how this life works. And that's how it leads many of them into spirituality.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about the peak experience thing, because I know when I started in the adult business in '98, what that business even became. The consumers of it they all went
Yeah, it's
crazy
insanity.
because it was like,
Yep.
what used to be vanilla, they're like, oh, that doesn't work anymore. We need this super hardcore stuff. Um, and
Yeah.
and yeah, the business went harder, 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 because everybody was like, well, I need a new peak experience to make me quote
More
unquote
stimulation.
happy, right? More
Yeah.
stimulation of some kind. And you do hit a level where it's like, well, we can't deliver more. I think it's the same. um you even see that with the drug addicts. I mean, their
Yeah.
receptors will just shut down. It's like,
Exactly.
at a certain
Or
point of
or they
cocaine,
overdose.
like, it's not going to do anything, because we're like, well, we're maxed out. Like, you can't peak it anymore.
Yep. Yeah. What was in, I guess, adult industry in '90s, missionary was like,
Oh
whoa,
yeah.
and like undressed people doing missionary, whoa.
Whoa. Yeah, fast forward
Right
20
now it's
years and
like
it's like, oh, 5 dicks and a midget. Yeah, here we go, right? It's like,
yeah,
ay.
it's
Well,
and that's where things went off rails. So that's why recalibrating what happiness is critical. It's not explosion. It's not an explosive experience. It's peaceful experience of joy. It's not fireworks. It's just, oh, this is great. And it's a feeling of every cell in the body smiling rather than being stimulated,
yeah.
because people are looking for being stimulated, electrified. And by the way, that's work of electrons. Whereas every cell in the body just being at peace and smiling, that's the work of protons, where it's just, oh, it's so nice.
All right. So contentment is the compass.
Contentment, I'd say that word is only part, because some people think, oh, I should be content with my situation, meaning like, oh, like, because that could lead people to staying in unaligned life
Mm,
and just being content with that. No, we should still seek happiness. And the content, there are different types of content, right? Like the one I described, peaceful and smiling. And there is one, my life is meh, and I accept it and I don't do anything about it.
okay. Yeah. I was thinking the
Yeah.
former, not the latter.
Yeah. Yeah. So formula is simple. Seek true, genuine happiness, and you will arrive at the right place in life and as part of this transition. And as, by the way, as you enter December, and I guess as it's year end, for a lot of people, the timelines will be new timelines. So do not be afraid to end experiences in life, because many of them might not be serving you. Either it's relationships, careers, the place where you live, either it's apartment where you live or the country where you live. Just be open minded. This is a time of a big reset. And the goal here is to be, when you ask yourself what would make you happy, and if the answer is non-standard, meaning, let's say you've lived your whole life in States and now you sense you should live in Germany, lean into it. Like, you don't have to, once again, key here, you don't need to make explosive decisions. Everything in life should be smooth. If you start being pulled, like, okay, go visit Germany, hang out there for a week or two, you might realize it came from your mind and it was more indicating that, yes, you should move out of states, but it wasn't Germany.
Mm,
And as part of the journey, you're like, oh, okay, now I just need to find a new spot because I'm done with living in States, or I'm done with living in Germany. And then you go to another 2, 3 countries intuitively and you find the spot. Similarly with the career. People think I was like, oh, that's it. This career doesn't make me happy. Hasn't made me happy for a long time. It's like, I gotta cut it. It's like, yes, make steps to wind down, but ask yourself what's next. If you have like a lot of savings and you've done financially okay, just cut it. But also don't cut it where you're like screw people over and etc. Smoothly cut it. It doesn't have to be rapid, but like cut it and start transitioning out. If you don't have savings, and I've observed it so many times, by the way, people are like, oh, what am I gonna do? I was like, I don't have savings, and like I know this career is over for me, and then they like cut it abruptly, and they just create this uncomfortable, inharmonious experience because they want it to move so fast. There's no like Matrix wants to create smooth transition. It's us from our mind. A lot of people are very extreme. They're like, oh, if it's not this, then I have to end it. No, it's like, okay, I know and I feel and I agree and I accept that I'm done with this career. Universe, show me the way, what's next, where it's comfortable, where it's harmonious, so that I transition. And somebody who I work with right now, similarly, she's transitioning out of career. She's like, okay, I'm done. And like she knew she was done a few years ago, and she kept getting rehired, promoted, pulled in, and etc. And then she's like, and I'm like, big kudos to her, because she doesn't come from wealthy family, she doesn't have savings, etc. She's like, I'm just done. I don't know what's next, and it's okay. I'm like, I'll figure it out. It's like, and so she resigns, and they go, can we keep you as a remote consultant, and we'll pay you a bunch of money, and you don't really need to do much? So this is an example of smooth transition.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Matrix created a situation where she's like barely working, still getting some cash. It was not a full payment, but still getting cash where she can continuously support her as she's figuring out what's next. And it's smoother. But if she went in and did like very rigid, I'm done, no, there's no option, and the way she also quit, like she gave like far in advance notice. She said like, hey guys, we'll help you transition. Like, I'm not in a rush, but hey, I'm wrapping things up,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so as many people are going through the transitions, the idea is you don't need to make them extreme. They can be smooth, and they can be enjoyable as well. And they should be enjoyable and smooth.
Okay, smooth and soft. That is the mantra.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. Good conversation, and I'm going to be thinking about smooth and soft now for the rest of the day.
Here we are. And hopefully everyone else is as well.
Exactly. All right.
Okay.
I will be back with you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.